Is there such a thing as too many spreadsheets? No. Simply ages ago, I did a little exploration of dolman sleeves because I didn't want to figure out how to self-draft set-in sleeves, which I still argue are much trickier than the delightful dolman. One of the things that I made was this very simple dress, and it turned out to not only be something that I really like and wear all the time, but also something that a lot of you said you liked and would love to make yourself. But I don't make tutorial videos. I don't even really want to make tutorial-ish videos anymore. And here's why. People see the word tutorial and think that you are going to give them a visual, step-by-step instruction manual, probably visual and verbal, honestly, of how to make this exact same thing. Boring! I don't want to make this exact same thing again. I want to make something similar, but different. And guess what? There is no better garment, in my opinion, than this one to make similar but different. I believe that this is one of the easiest and most straightforward garments for a beginner to successfully self-draft. If you have never gone rogue before and tossed the patterns aside, this is what I would recommend starting with. The theory behind this dress is very simple, and once you understand that theory, there are, theoretically, limitless variables that you can apply to make completely unique dresses from that same base foundation. Which is why I've made a spreadsheet! Yay! It is linked in the description so you can follow along and use it how you please, if you please. Come here. Hello. Hello, are you feeling all lonely and needy? Oh, thank you. Bloop. Let's get comfy. At its core, this dress is two rectangles. It could even be one long rectangle with a hole cut in the center. Theoretically, I haven't tried that one yet, but logically it says yes. You schloop the top part down a little depending on how much sleeve you want, or if you've got a nice drapey fabric, you could honestly just leave it straight. You curve the sides in a little bit if you want some underside to your sleeves, but you could theoretically just sew straight up the sides as well and leave a gap. You cut a neckline of your desired style, finish the edges your desired way, and you cinch the waistline by some method if you want. That's it. That's a dress. That is this dress. I mean, I also added pockets. We'll talk about that briefly too, but like, y'all, how incredibly simple is that? Then you can start mixing it up. What type of fabric are you using? Pretty much anything will work, kinda. How long is it? Is the skirt straight or tiered or circular or godade? Are there inseam pockets or welt pockets or patch pockets? Empire waist, double waist, natural waist? And how are you making that waist cinch? You have options. The sleeves may always be dolman style for ease of drafting, but there's a lot you can do to mix them up as well. The length, the shape, the add-ons, go nuts. And necklines, square, scoop, crew, boat, V, lace-up, tied, keyhole, sweetheart. And don't even get me started on all of the extra areas of creativity, slits, color blocking or patchworking, unique edge finishes, overlays. Not everything will work every time, but a lot of stuff will work most of the time. Are you getting overwhelmed? I was too, hence the spreadsheet. We're gonna start at the beginning. We're gonna talk dress theory. We're gonna go through every category on this dress design spreadsheet that I've made, talk about how each choice affects the next one, all of the possibilities you have. But before we do any of that, we're gonna go pop by the kitchen for a morning power up, because this video is sponsored by AG1. Building healthy habits is easiest for me when it's as simple and straightforward as possible. So though I would absolutely love to supplement my diet with a range of vitamins, I've never been able to get the whole collection together and actually start doing it. AG1 brings that simplicity that I really need. It's just one supplement, one powder with all the nutrients included that will support both my mental and physical health throughout the day. AG1 isn't just a powdered multivitamin. It also includes pre- and probiotics and antioxidants, so I know that my gut and immune health are also being supported. AG1 has no gluten, lactose, or animal byproducts, and it's flavored with natural essences of pineapple and vanilla beans to make the experience of intaking so many good nutrients at once as pleasant as possible. I personally am extremely sensitive to food textures, so while you can just put AG1 in water and shake it up, which is how Matt prefers to drink it, I blend mine into a morning smoothie. If you're looking for a clear and simple way to supplement your daily nutrients and form healthy habits for the future, give AG1 a try. Click the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen to order your welcome box. With my link, you'll get 5 free AG1 travel packs and a free bottle of vitamin D3 and K2 with your first purchase. Now let me chug this goodness and we'll get back to dress theory. Okay, here's the thing. This dress spreadsheet is entirely based on dolman sleeves. After sewing for 3 years and freehanding my garments for a large chunk of that time, I have come to realize that sleeves maketh the challenge, even more so than pants for me. The shape and curves and size of set-in sleeves is just something that I personally haven't learned how to self-draft with ease yet, which is why I wouldn't really recommend them if you are trying to self-draft or freehand for the first time. Dolman sleeves are an easy replacement, especially since I personally really enjoy the look and the feel of them. But there is one other sleeve type that I would qualify as almost just as easy, worth looking into in the early stages of self-drafting. I just don't know what you call it really. I've done it here, and here, and here. I've seen them called peasant sleeves, but to me that very much implies a puffed short sleeve specifically, rather than this exact style of sleeve attachment. Technically, they're raglan sleeves, right? Because they're created with a diagonal seam attaching them to the bodice, which is what a raglan sleeve is. I'm just used to raglan sleeves always being on sort of like a crew neck shirt, or even like the dress that I make all the time, the one pattern that I love. But I think the foundation here is the same, so I'm gonna call them raglan sleeves, and you'll notice that there is a whole second page on the design spreadsheet for raglan sleeves. I say this style is slightly more complex simply because you go from that base idea of just 2 rectangles of fabric, this simplest form for the dolman sleeve style, and you have to expand that to 4 rectangles of fabric. I don't think it's more difficult, it's just slightly more involved. But it can provide you with some different neckline and sleeve styles that the dolman sleeve design doesn't really give you. All that to say, we are mainly gonna go through the dolman sleeve spreadsheet and all of the design options there, but I will lightly touch on the raglan sleeve option at the end. These spreadsheets kind of remind me of the build dice that Simone Yetch makes and sells. Like, you could, in theory, randomly select items from each category and combine them if you just wanted to make a dress but you didn't have any ideas for what to do. In fact, this is a theory that I would very much like to try out, and I think I'm gonna go do that right now. So, please hold. I'll be back. I'm sure this won't take me several days or anything. Okay, I'm back. Did that. My takeaway is that you should not randomly select dress design elements unless you're going for like a learning lark. Did I learn stuff? Sure. Did I make successful dresses? Less sure. I'm gonna use the dresses that I made as examples this week, but if you're interested in how it all went down, keep an eye out for next week's video when I will show you how it all went down. Spoiler alert, a little bit poorly. One thing making the randomly selected dresses did make me realize is that I need to try a very simple, basic version of this dolman sleeve dress out of woven material. Non-stretch, because I need to prove to myself that the woven category should even be on there. Yeah, I had to use woven material for both of these dresses, and it was lightly problematic. The blue and white striped dress that sparked this entire thing and inspired the spreadsheet in the first place is not a super stretchy material, but it is still knit fabric. It does still stretch. So I pulled a medium weight woven material that I don't care too much about, ironically, also blue and white stripes, and quickly made a very similar dress to that original one to make sure that it works without stretch. One moment, please. It works! It very much does work without stretch. I would just recommend giving yourself a little bit extra wiggle room if you're working with a non-stretch material, especially if it's a stiffer one that doesn't like have any flow or ease to it. But despite being a little less comfortable in my opinion, because I do prefer stretchy stuff, this worked totally fine. And this is with a final width measurement that is just 2 or 3 inches larger than my bust measurement. So the woven category is vindicated. It gets to stay. I kind of want to move into my studio. It's quieter in there. Let's go. Okay, I'm comfy. Let's do this. Again, as a reminder, this is not a tutorial. We're just talking theory of dress design. Hopefully this is a good starting place or inspiration if you are experimenting with freehanding and self-drafting. But here's how the spreadsheet of dress design works in theory. First up, we have to select a type of fabric. Very simple, knit or woven. Stretch material is going to be way easier here, although a super thin or stretchy or slippery knit could create some complications, particularly while actually sewing. Woven materials will create complications of a different kind, but as I have just proven to myself, they do still work. Depending on which type of fabric you select, you can then jump to the coordinating column for fabric style. This is how I would categorize knit materials, and this may be entirely unique to me, but I feel like every stretch material that I have falls within one of these 5 categories: bulky, slippery, sturdy, thin, and lacy. Bulky is sweaterish knit. It could also be thin in places, it could be sturdy or super stretchy, it could almost be lacy, but ultimately, it's bulky. Slippery is stuff like spandex. It's slippery. Easiest way to think of it for me. Sturdy is going to be your 2-way stretch materials, or 1-way as I tend to think of them, stable knits. Thin is your more typical 4-way stretch knit, just the very average soft stuff that abounds. I love it. And lacy is anything straight up see-through, like, you know, actual stretch lace or stretch tulle. Over on the woven column, we again have my personal 4 categories of style: heavy, medium, silky, and sheer. These seem pretty self-explanatory to me. Heavy fabrics like thick brocades or I don't know, anything that's a chunk in the hand. This is probably the worst fabric on this spreadsheet for this specific dress style. I put it on there because you always could, but I would not recommend using a heavy woven material for this simple dress style. Medium is all medium weight wovens. Wahoo! And then when it comes to lightweight stuff, for me that breaks down into 2 categories. Fabric that's really light and slippery and silky but isn't see-through, maybe translucent but not transparent. And then straight up see-through stuff. Laces, organzas, I hate naming fabric types. Sheer. Anything sheer. We do have the little caveat column of lining styles if you're doing a see-through fabric. I gave 3 options there. You could either do a fully attached lining, that's the pretty regular way to line something, or you could do a detached lining, as in a completely separate garment that is meant to be worn under the original garment, or you could skip it altogether and do no lining. This dress style is really good for beachwear, a bathing suit cover-up, or a simple negligee, so you don't have to line it. Now that you've chosen a fabric, you can start specifying the design elements, and here's where you really want to keep in mind the type of fabric you've selected, which is why randomly selected dresses didn't really work super well. You could, in theory, also skip the fabric section, do all of the design elements according to the spreadsheet, and then go back and select a fabric that is going to complement the elements you chose. We're starting from the top. So neckline first. There's a lot of options here. The dolman sleeve style doesn't really affect your front neckline too much, so you can kind of do whatever style you want. Note that a turtleneck means you should skip the next column because there is no different back neckline possible. It's the same all the way around. You'd also want to take into account the fabric you're using there. A turtleneck out of a non-stretch fabric will not go over your head. The rest of these I think are all pretty straightforward and self-explanatory, with maybe the exception of tied. By that I mean one of those necklines with a tie or a sash across the front. Kind of like keyhole, but with the ability to open it and tie it closed. Hence, tied. Of course, some of these necklines are going to be more difficult than others. If you're just starting out, a crew or a scoop neckline is probably going to be easier, especially when you consider how you're finishing those edges. V and square necklines aren't very hard to pattern out, but you do have to figure out how you're adding facings, binding, or hemming on those right and acute angles. So we move on to back neckline, and here's where you want to start being a little more careful. There are still a lot of options, but depending on your fabric type and what you just chose for the front neckline, some of them may not work. If you have a pretty wide or deep front neckline, then you probably want a higher or tighter back neckline because dolman sleeves are kind of held in place by your neckline. If I do a low V in the front and a low V in the back, my sleeves are going to fall off my shoulders. A simple crew or boat neck is going to be the easiest to do on the back neckline, but again, keep your type of fabric in mind because if you're using non-stretch or low stretch, you probably don't want to do a crew neck all the way around on both the back and the front, as once again, it'll be really difficult to get over your head without that stretch. Keyhole can be a better choice here. It gives you that opening in the back neckline, maybe with a little hook and eye or a button up at the top that makes the whole neckline wider and easier to get over your head if you're using a woven material. On the other hand, if you specifically want a low back on your dolman sleeve dress, I'd recommend adding a tie across the top to connect those two sides so that the weight of the sleeves doesn't pull them off your shoulders. Speaking of sleeves, we've got several columns here. First thing you want to choose is your sleeve length. No sleeves means you're actually cutting into your rectangle of fabric to make it stop on top of the shoulders. Technically, this means it's not a dolman sleeve anymore because it's not a sleeve at all, but it is an option. More commonly, you'll see a dropped shoulder, which extends just to or past that shoulder bone, that shoulder edge. If you don't cut the corner of your rectangle at all, you just sew across the top and sew up the side and leave a gap for your arm, you'll end up with a dropped shoulder or possibly kind of a short sleeve, depending on how wide your rectangle of fabric was in the first place. If you select one of these two options, you can skip the sleeve shape column because there is no sleeve to shape, and move right on to the sleeve additions. A butterfly sleeve is a circle of fabric added right on. You could do that to no sleeve or to a drop sleeve, and it would just have a lightly different look. A flounce is a spiral-shaped piece of fabric. When sewn straight, it ruffles out a little, but should not be confused with a ruffle, which is a straight, long rectangle that is gathered up and then sewn on. You could also add a turned up or folded up cuff, although that would be kind of hard on a no sleeve option. It is technically possible. The next three are all full sleeve additions. Sewing a separate sleeve onto a no sleeve option is kind of the same as doing a set-in sleeve, but you could technically go for it. Adding a longer sleeve to a dropped shoulder is a pretty common look though. It's a little easier to draft out than a set-in sleeve because your added on sleeve is not going over a shoulder, so it doesn't require the same level of precise sizing with this humped shape at the top. If you really don't want to have to worry about matching up measurements, you can always just make your add-on sleeve a little bit bigger than the armhole and then gather it a bit. Up at the top, you could even gather it underneath if you want it to not show as much. Gathering things is amazing. It is my favorite trick. Ultimately, the add-on sleeves are a little bit of a harder design choice though, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for your first try. The three options that I gave are an added short puffed sleeve. You could also technically add a short sleeve that is not puffed, that's just straight out, but that's gonna be so similar to just a regular short dolman sleeve that I would question what the point would be of making it a separate piece. Then there is a longer tube sleeve, just, you know, a straight sleeve added onto your dropped or no shoulder, any length you want it, or a longer gathered sleeve, which would require some sort of cuff at the end, whether that's elastic inserted or a separate cuff sewn on. Also, you could just add nothing to your no or drop sleeves and move right along to the waistline column, but we are gonna go back to sleeve length and look at the other options. Pretty straightforward, short, I'd call that mid-bicep, above the elbow, 3/4, which would be below the elbow or mid-forearm for me, and then long. Let me note though that anything below the elbow is not gonna be a super good choice if you're using a woven or non-stretch fabric, as I just learned with the randomly selected dresses. Dolman sleeves have this kind of saggy armpit shape to them, which just means that they can be a little more restricting to your movement, especially if you do it in a non-woven fabric. This is why I really say that a knit fabric for dolman sleeve dress designs is gonna be sort of easier overall, or less problematic. If you are using a non-stretch material and you put a long sleeve on your dress, you're barely gonna be able to move your arms. This is why it's so common to do a drop shoulder with a longer sleeve added on. It affects your range of movement somehow. It just works a little bit better, I think, because it's just getting closer to that original normal other idea of set-in sleeves. But then it also comes closer to the complications of drafting a set-in sleeve. So this is an area where you really want to take your fabric choice into consideration. All of these lengths give you option for sleeve shape though, so we move to that column next. Straight is like a tube, possibly even tapering inward, which again is not going to be great for movement in a non-stretch material. Bell-shaped is tighter at the top and flaring towards the bottom. Stretch is still going to be helpful there. Trumpet flares out immediately, and this makes it a really great dolman sleeve option for any type of fabric. Bishop is basically bell-shaped but with a cuff, and gathered is basically trumpet-shaped but with a cuff. From there, we can also look at sleeve additions for longer lengths. As before, you could add a flounce or a ruffle. Might look super weird on a long sleeve, but you could. You could add that folded up or turned up cuff, super cute on a short sleeve. You could add a band cuff, one that is made separately and then sewn on, or an elastic cuff, a piece of elastic sewn directly into the hem of the sleeve, or a shirred cuff, shirring used to cinch the whole sleeve inward around the wrist. Some of these additions are kind of redundant. If you are doing a bishop sleeve shape, then you already have to have a cuff, so it's more just about which kind of cuff you want to use. But if you have a bell sleeve shape and then you add a cuff to it, then you're now just doing a bishop sleeve shape, you know? You could also add nothing and move on to the next column, waistlines. For starters, you want to decide where your waistline is going to fall. It could fall nowhere, no waistline at all, in which case you skip the next column and move right on to skirt shape. But if you do want some form of a waistline, then you could start with empire, right up under that bust, high, which is kind of on the rib cage for me. It's not quite as high as empire. Natural, which is where your waist bend is. Low, which is kind of belly button height. Or double. By that I mean you can put in 2 waist cinches, for example, one that is high and one that is natural. Keep in mind that wherever your waistline is, that is where the overall shaping for the dress is going to come in. So if you do a low waist, you're going to have sort of some extra wideness and bagginess to the top part of the dress, which is not a bad thing. It could totally work. On the other hand, if you gather the dress right under the bust for an empire waist, that gathering is going to fit really tightly to your bust, and there's not going to be any extra bagginess anywhere. So assuming that we have selected some sort of waistline, we now need to decide how we're creating that cinch. Lots of options here, and again, it's an area where you really want to keep your fabric in mind. Thin elastic or wider elastic if you want your waistline to just be simple and pronounced. Great, easy options. Shirring is an amazing way to cinch in a waistline with that wider band, but you could also mimic this sort of feeling with that double waistline if you don't want to do shirring. A drawstring is a fairly easy option to construct that gives you a lot of control and adjustability after the dress is fully finished. And then of course you could always just use a sash. You could do a separate piece of material that is just tied around the dress wherever you want. You can do two pieces of material that are sewn into the side seams and can be tied either in the back or in the front. Note that this is going to cinch the dress in a rather different way because it's not encircling the entire thing. So you're going to have all of the gathered together section in the back and then a smoothness to the front, or vice versa. You could do 4 pieces of fabric sewn into the side seams so that you can tie one on the front and one on the back at the same time. This might sound like a little bit ridiculous in concept, but keep in mind that a sash does not necessarily mean this wide chunk of fabric. It could be a string. And then finally, a sewn-in one-piece sash is kind of like the separate one, but it's attached to the dress itself, usually across the front and tying in the back, which once again is going to give you that different cinching method where you're kind of pulling the whole dress back rather than evenly gathering it all the way around. The last cinching option is lacing. You could sew some loops into your side seams and then lace the dress in the back or in the front, or both at the same time. You could just do 1 or 2 loops, so it's a very thin amount of lacing there, or you could do loops all the way down from, right under the armpits to your low waist and tie the whole thing. Options! Now what about the shape of the skirt itself? What is happening below the waistline? Again, we have a lot of options. And again, we want to keep our fabric style in mind. I'm starting to sound like a broken record here. A straight skirt would be if we took that rectangle of fabric and did nothing to it. It's being gathered by your waistline, assuming you decided to have a waistline, but other than that, it's nothing. It's just straight down. You could also flare the skirt slightly for a bit of volume, which is what I tend to do with this. Hobble or pencil is the opposite of flaring. It's flaring inward, which is not really something I would recommend, but it does work in certain situations. Trumpet goes down straight or even inward a little bit, and then flares at or below the knees. I realize this is a bit confusing because in sleeve shape that would be called bell, but I'm just kind of going with the terminology that I've already seen used before. Also, my batwing dress is a really good example of a long tube dolman sleeve low back dress. Technically it's a tied back because of the spider web, and it has what looks like a trumpet skirt, but is actually really a hobble skirt with a ruffle attached. So it really plays around with a lot of these design elements in a fun way. And also I just wanted to show it off because I'm very proud of this dress and it's cool. But also stretchy fabric, y'all. This design would not have worked in a non-stretch material, especially in that sleeve area. From here, we're getting into skirt shapes that require additions. So tiered means that you take your original base dress, your rectangles of fabric, and you add more fabric onto them, usually gathered lightly, but that's not necessarily required. This is a really great option if you want a longer dress, but you don't have a lot of your base material. Godets are triangles of fabric that are added into slits in the skirt, basically. You could add them onto the side seams. You could do one added in the back. You could have huge ones that go all the way up to your waist. You could have little ones right along the hem of the dress so that it flares out. Godets are really fun. You can really play around with them. And then these last 3 options are completely separate skirts. So here we are complicating the design a little bit more. We are cutting it in half wherever your waistline is. Instead of just 2 big rectangles, we now have smaller rectangles attached to a separate skirt. This is still really simple though, because if you think about it, you're already sewing something into the waistline, whether it's elastic or a drawstring or even just shirring, there's already going to be a seam there. So you can take your bodice, all of the elements that we've already discussed, exactly the same, and just have it stop wherever your waistline is, and then graft on a separate skirt. Circle, gathered, pleated. I didn't put it on here, but technically it could just be straight panels. You just want to make sure that the skirt you're adding on is the same size as the hem or the waistline of your bodice. In other words, you're not gathering in your bodice to your actual waistline measurement and then adding on the skirt in that size because you won't be able to get it on. So even if you add a circle skirt, it's actually going to be a gathered circle skirt in the end because of that waist cinch, yeah? So when I say a separate gathered skirt, I mean you cut out a piece of fabric even bigger, gather it down, attach it, and then let the waist cinch gather it even more. So like this would not be a good option with many fabric types, but it could be a really cool option with just the right fabric type, something very thin and floaty. On to skirt length. I think these are pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, some lengths are gonna look better with some skirt shapes. Like, what does a mini skirt with godets look like? I'm not sure, but you could try it. And then we have hem styles, the most common hem style, of course, being straight. But you could also do high in the front, low in the back. Asymmetrical would be higher on one side, lower on the other, and then handkerchief is what happens if you make a circle skirt, but you don't actually cut the hem into a circle. Upsies and downsies and upsies and downsies. Those are all the basic design elements of a dress. Those are all of the design choices that you have to make, even if you don't really realize that you're making some of them because they're so subconscious. Like, we don't often sit there and think about whether we're going to make our hemline straight or asymmetrical. We just default to straight, but we did still technically make that choice. The last three columns are extra elements, starting with slits in the skirt. You of course could just have none, but if your skirt is long, especially if the shape is either straight or just flared, and especially if you're using non-stretch material like this one I am currently wearing, a slit can be really helpful for range of movement. Or if you've chosen a woven fabric and a pencil shape, it might be entirely necessary for range of movement. Skirt extras are just a ruffle or a flounce that you could add to the hem. I feel like there are other like extra things you could add to a skirt, but I really couldn't think of any, so we're leaving it at that. And then we have pockets. These are all the pocket styles I could think of that would work well with this style of dress. I prefer what I call inseam long pockets, which is a shape like this that is attached both into the side seam and into whatever waist seam you have. They're a lot better supported because of being attached to that waist seam, but obviously if you have chosen to have no waistline, or if your waist cinch is like a sash or something where there's no seam already there to kind of hide the fact that you've attached your pockets, that may not be an option. Inseam bag pockets are very common. They are shaped like this. They're a great option as well. They just aren't quite as well supported, so if you're using a stretch material, you can't really put stuff in them without them sagging the entire dress. And then of course there is good old patch pockets, either a square or a creative shape. You can actually get really creative with patch pockets. It's a lot of fun to explore. Welt pockets, similar to inseam long for me, I think these are best when they're supported at the waistline, which is what I did with the yellow dress that I am making next week. Next week, she says. But you don't have to. You don't have to have them with that extra support. And then cutout pockets are kind of like welt pockets, but without the welt. Like really, you can just cut a slit or a circle or a shape of any kind in your dress and turn that into the pocket opening. And if you want a tutorial on how to do any of those pocket types, there are tons of them on YouTube. Not from me. Okay, and we made it. That is my dress design spreadsheet of theory. That's how I would break down the process of creating unique and varied styles of what is essentially a very simple dress. If we look at that original blue striped dress again, here are the elements that I selected for it. Knit, thin, V, crew, short, straight-ish, none, high, thin elastic, straight, maxi, straight, double side slits, side seam bag. It feels like a lot of elements when you lay it all out like that, but hopefully if you've been overwhelmed by the process of freehanding or self-drafting or designing dresses from scratch yourself, this very clear and straightforward spreadsheet will be helpful to you. I think it becomes second nature really fast to go through every single one of these elements in my head without even really thinking about it. Or without intentionally thinking about it. I am still thinking about it. You know what I mean. It is really nice to see it all laid out so very clearly and simply for this one dress style though. I love it. But I promised that we would lightly touch on the other easy base dress style, peasant or raglan sleeves. Again, the base shape of the design of this dress or shirt, both of these could be shirts as well. I should throw that in there. The base shape is 2 rectangles with armpit cutouts of some kind, and then 2 smaller rectangles, which are your sleeves, with matching armpit cutouts. The way that this works on your body is with gathering all the way around the neckline and sleeves, typically done with elastic. So again, on this page of the spreadsheet, we have those same 4 columns of fabric choices at the start. Neckline is where it changes because there's a rather limited number of necklines that you can do with this design style. Basically, you can either leave your fabric straight across the top, giving you like a squarish neckline, or you can curve that piece of fabric, which is going to give you a rounded neckline. Theoretically, you could create a V neckline by cutting the top of your rectangle like this, but this would probably require you to do an open neckline, by which I mean a neckline with a slit in it. The difference here, and you can do open or closed necklines on any of the neckline options, which is why it gets its own column, is that an open neckline is cinched with a drawstring so that you get that little bow in the middle. A closed one is cinched with elastic because you have no way to adjust it. And I will just note here that I wouldn't recommend doing drawstring all the way around the top of this garment, even if you're doing the open neckline, because it just gets really hard to evenly space out the gathering all the way around. So I would recommend just doing drawstring on the front neckline and still using elastic on the sleeves and the back neckline. I suppose you could do elastic and a closed neckline with a V neck, but it would just have to be 2 separate pieces of elastic that are gathered independently and sewn down in the center, if that makes sense. Anyway, from here, you have even fewer options for the back neckline, square or rounded, because while I guess in theory you could have an open back neckline that is drawstrung, that would be kind of annoying to fiddle around with because it's your back. Then we move on to sleeves. The shortest option here is a cap sleeve, which I'm including any kind of wide strap or just anything that only reaches the edge of your shoulder as a cap sleeve. Obviously, like the no sleeve option on the dolman dress design, this kind of changes everything because you no longer have a rectangle of fabric with armpit cutouts. But it is still an option, so I wanted to include it. Then you have the same other lengths, short, above the elbow, 3/4, and long. If you choose a cap sleeve, you can jump straight to sleeve additions. Otherwise, you can choose a sleeve shape according to how long your sleeve is, and then jump to additions to see if you're adding a ruffle or a flounce or something. Note that a puffed short sleeve is really the most common option here. Some sort of gathered cuff is a given with that. But you can also just do a simple trumpet shape. A butterfly sleeve done in this style would have to be a really big circle because that inner circle that you cut out would have to be big enough to gather down and have an elastic insert, but you could theoretically do it. Long sleeves are pretty simple with this design. Again, you can either do straight or trumpet or bell, or you can choose one of the designs that has a cuff built in, bishop, poet, or gathered. After this, we are pretty much back to the exact same design elements as the dolman sleeve spreadsheet because from the waist down, These dresses are exactly the same. So that's it. That is my theory of dress design. I hope that these spreadsheets might be helpful to somebody who wants to dive into self-drafting or freehanding for the first time and just isn't really sure where to start. I think either of these garments is a great place. Again, I have linked the spreadsheet in the description if you would like to look at it closer or use it in any way, and come back next week to go on a randomly selected journey with me. Yay! All hail the spreadsheets! Okay, bye. Don't you go out on me. Boom. Shakalaka. Oh, the winds have arrived. We do have the caveat. Why is there gunkus on my glasses? You're welcome.